My name is Jenna, and I am 27 years old, 9 months pregnant and waddling like a penguin. I still drove to my parents' house for our monthly family dinner. As I sat at the table, sharp contractions began rippling through my body. When I finally gasped, "I think I'm about to give birth," my parents laughed coldly. "Not our grandchild," they said. I'll never forget that moment. Before I continue my story, where are you watching from? Hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever felt rejected by the people who should love you most. Growing up in the Anderson household meant structure expectations and very little room for personal choices. My father, a renowned surgeon at Memorial Hospital, had mapped out my entire life before I could even speak. Medical school specialization in cardiology and eventually joining his practice. These weren't suggestions, they were mandates. My mother, a former school principal, reinforced these expectations with constant comparisons to cousins' neighbors' kids, and basically anyone who happened to be excelling at something I wasn't. Did you hear that Margaret's daughter got accepted to Johns Hopkins, top of her class, too? My mother would casually mention during dinner, her eyes sliding toward me as I pushed food around my plate. And she's 2 years younger than you, Jenna. Even when I brought home straight A's, the celebration was brief, immediately followed by questions about why I wasn't in more advanced classes or participating in additional extracurriculars that would look good on college applications. Physical affection was practically non-existent in our home. The rare hug felt awkward and forced, usually saved for public appearances, where my parents needed to maintain their image as the perfect family. I learned early that achievement was the only acceptable currency for earning my parents' approval. And even then, the exchange rate was terrible. Punishment for falling short of expectations was swift and painful. When I got a B in advanced chemistry during junior year, my father didn't speak to me for 2 weeks. My mother removed all distractions from my room, including my beloved books that had nothing to do with academics, until the next test, which I was expected to ace. Disappointment isn't something we tolerate in this family. My father would say, his voice low and controlled, somehow more frightening than if he'd shouted. Andersons are exceptional. Period. I spent my teenage years drowning in anxiety, terrified of making mistakes. While other kids worried about dates and fashion, I lost sleep over quiz scores and class rankings. The pressure was crushing, but whenever I tried to talk about it, my concerns were dismissed as weakness. "The real world is much harder," my mother would say. "We're preparing you for success. You'll thank us someday." By the time I reached college, I was burned out, but still dutifully enrolled as a pre-med major. For 2 years, I went through the motions, calling home with updates about classes and grades, receiving only criticism in return. But something was happening inside me, a quiet rebellion brewing. During my junior year, I volunteered at the university hospital and discovered something unexpected. I loved nursing. The direct patient care, the emotional connection, the practical hands-on work. Everything about it felt right in a way medicine never had. For the first time, I could envision a future that excited me. When I changed my major to nursing, the phone call home was the most difficult conversation of my life up to that point. "You're throwing away everything we've built for you," my father said, his voice icy with disappointment. "Nurses are valuable, Dad. They're the backbone of healthcare," I tried to explain. "Nurses work for doctors, Jenna. Andersons don't work for people. We lead. We excel. This is unacceptable." My mother got on the line next. "Think about what people will say, all that potential wasted. If this is some phase to get attention, it's gone far enough." That night marked the beginning of the fracture in our family. I stood my ground, finished my nursing degree with honors, and moved into my own apartment immediately after graduation at 22. My parents attended the ceremony, but left without taking photos. The message was clear. This achievement didn't count. Despite the tension, I maintained contact, showing up for monthly family dinners out of some mixture of obligation, hope, and stubborn determination, not to be the one who gave up on the relationship. These gatherings were exercises in discomfort, stilted conversations, prolonged silences, and undercurrents of disappointment so thick they seemed to affect the taste of the food. "How's the nursing?" my father would ask, never failing to pause before the word, as though it pained him to say it. "It's going well. I'm being considered for the trauma response team." I would reply, trying to infuse enthusiasm into my voice. Hmm. He would respond before turning to discuss politics or stocks or anything else with my mother, effectively closing the door on any real connection. I kept trying bringing thoughtful gifts on holidays, asking about their lives, suggesting family outings, all met with polite rejection or lukewarm acceptance, followed by criticism. The emotional exhaustion after these visits was profound. Yet I continued to show up month after month feeling like an unwelcome guest in the home where I grew up. You don't have to keep doing this, my friend Tracy would tell me after listening to me cry following particularly difficult dinners. Family is supposed to support you, not tear you down. But I couldn't let go. Somewhere deep inside, I still craved their approval, their love. I still hoped that someday something would change, that someday they would see me, really see me, and be proud of the woman I had become. Little did I know that things were about to get much more complicated, and the already fragile relationship with my parents would be tested in ways I never imagined. I met Aaron Nazari on a Tuesday morning in the hospital cafeteria. I had spilled coffee on my scrubs and was frantically dabbing at the stain when a voice with a slight accent said, "Try cold water and salt, works every time." Looking up, I saw a man about my age with kind brown eyes and a gentle smile. He introduced himself as a biomedical engineer working on implementing new monitoring systems in the ICU. There was something immediately comfortable about his presence. No pretense, no judgment, just genuine warmth. "Does that actually work, the salt thing?" I asked skeptically. "Absolutely. My mother swears by it, and that woman has never been wrong about anything in her entire life," he replied with a laugh that made the corners of his eyes crinkle. What started as occasional coffee breaks between shifts gradually evolved into lunch dates, movie nights, and weekend hikes. Aaron was thoughtful, brilliant, and possessed a quiet confidence I admired. He listened when I spoke, really listened, something I wasn't accustomed to from my family. 3 months into dating, I decided it was time for Aaron to meet my parents. I warned him extensively, preparing him for their likely cold reception and possible inappropriate comments. "They're very traditional and can be judgmental," I explained nervously as we drove to their house. "Just try not to take anything personally." Aaron squeezed my hand. "It will be fine. They raised an amazing daughter, so they must have some good qualities." His optimism was admirable, but misplaced. From the moment we stepped through the door, my parents made their disapproval clear. My father barely shook Aaron's hand, and my mother's smile never reached her eyes. Throughout dinner, they asked invasive questions about his family's background, religion, and political views, barely disguising their prejudice behind a veneer of polite conversation. "And your parents, they immigrated from—" Where exactly, my father asked, though I had already told him Aaron's family was from Iran. "Iran, sir. My father is a professor of mathematics, and my mother is a pediatrician. They came here for graduate school and stayed." "Interesting choice," my father muttered, emphasizing the word choice, as though moving to America had been some kind of suspicious decision. Later in the kitchen, my mother cornered me. "He seems nice enough, Jenna, but be realistic. The cultural differences are too significant. These relationships don't last." "His culture isn't an issue, Mom. We share the same values and goals," I whispered furiously. She patted my arm condescendingly. "You'll understand when you're older. Some differences can't be bridged." Aaron remained polite throughout the evening, despite the increasingly uncomfortable atmosphere. On the drive home, he was quiet, and I was mortified. "I am so sorry about them," I said, fighting back tears of frustration. He reached for my hand. "You have nothing to apologize for, Jenna. Their behavior reflects on them, not you." Despite my parents' obvious disapproval, our relationship continued to flourish. 6 months later, Aaron and I decided to move in together. My parents' reaction was predictably negative. Living together before marriage, with someone from that background. "What will people think?" my mother lamented during one of our increasingly rare phone calls. "I don't care what people think, Mom. I care about being happy." "Happiness isn't everything, Jenna. Stability, family approval, social standing. These things matter in the long run." I stopped trying to justify my choices and instead focused on building a life with Aaron. Our apartment became a haven of acceptance and mutual respect. We talked about the future, marriage, children, careers, and for the first time I felt like my dreams mattered. Aaron never stopped trying to win my parents' approval. He sent thoughtful gifts on holidays, asked me about their interests to find common ground, and always spoke of them respectfully despite their treatment of him. His patience and understanding only made me love him more. Then came the day that changed everything. The pregnancy test showed positive, and our planned future suddenly accelerated into the present. Aaron's reaction was pure joy. "We're going to be parents," he whispered, holding me close, his hand gently resting on my still flat stomach. "I can't wait to meet our little one." We spent the evening talking about names, nursery colors, and how to rearrange our apartment to make room for the baby. Aaron wanted to tell everyone immediately, especially our families. "My parents will be thrilled," he said, already reaching for his phone. "My mother has been hinting about grandchildren since she met you." My stomach knotted with anxiety. "Can we wait to tell my parents? I need to figure out the right way to approach this." Aaron looked confused, but agreed. "Of course, whenever you're ready." I never found the courage to make that call. Instead, I shared the news with Tracy and a few close friends from work, all of whom responded with excitement and offers of support. Aaron's family sent care packages from across the country, ginger tea for morning sickness, handmade baby blankets, and countless calls checking on my health and well-being. As my body changed and our baby grew, so did the distance between me and my parents. Our monthly dinners became increasingly strained as I made excuses for not drinking wine and wore loose clothing to hide my expanding waistline. I knew I couldn't keep the pregnancy secret forever, but each time I tried to share the news, the words caught in my throat. Then tragedy struck without warning. Aaron was driving back from a conference 3 hours away when a truck crossed the center line. The hospital called me at work. The irony of being a nurse receiving that kind of call wasn't lost on me, even through the shock. I drove to the trauma center in a fog, praying the entire way. The doctors were kind but direct. Aaron had suffered catastrophic injuries. They had done everything possible, but there was no hope for recovery. I was 6 months pregnant when I held his hand and said goodbye. The next weeks passed in a blur of funeral arrangements, paperwork, and grief so intense it felt physical. Aaron's parents flew in their own pain temporarily set aside as they helped me navigate the aftermath. They never once questioned their role in our child's life, even as they returned home with broken hearts. "This baby is part of Aaron, part of us all," his mother said before leaving. "We will always be here for both of you. Always." Alone in our apartment, surrounded by remnants of our shared life and plans, I finally reached for the phone to call my parents. Perhaps now faced with this unimaginable loss, they would offer the support I so desperately needed. "Mom," I said when she answered, my voice breaking. "Aaron died in a car accident. I'm pregnant and I don't know how to do this alone." The silence on the line stretched for several seconds before she responded. "Oh, Jenna, we warned you about getting involved with someone so different. These complicated situations never end well." No sympathy, no questions about my well-being or the baby's, just confirmation that somehow in their eyes this tragedy validated their prejudice. "I needed my mother," I whispered, "not your judgment." "Well, what do you expect us to say? You hid this pregnancy from us for months, and now you want us to pick up the pieces. Perhaps you should consider adoption. Give the baby to a stable traditional family." I hung up too shattered to even feel angry. In that moment, something inside me hardened. If they couldn't support me during the worst time of my life, I would find the strength elsewhere. I would create the loving family my child deserved, even if it was just the two of us. The days following Aaron's death were the darkest I'd ever experienced. Grief enveloped me like a heavy blanket, making even the simplest tasks feel impossible. Each morning, I woke to the momentary amnesia of sleep, followed by the crushing remembrance that Aaron was gone. The only thing keeping me moving forward was the life growing inside me. Aaron's child, our future. I had to take a leave of absence from work. My colleagues pooled their sick days to donate to me, ensuring I would have income while I processed my loss and prepared for single motherhood. The hospital administration, who had known Aaron through his work on their systems, showed unexpected compassion by extending my health benefits. My apartment, once our happy home, now felt haunted by absence. Aaron's coffee mug still sat on his desk. His favorite sweater hung on the bedroom hook. His phone charger remained plugged in beside the bed. I couldn't bring myself to move these things as though disturbing them would somehow make his absence more permanent. Sleep became elusive. I would lie awake, hands on my growing belly, talking to our baby about the father they would never meet. "Your daddy was kind," I would whisper in the darkness. "He loved puzzles and terrible science jokes. He sang in the shower, always off key. He would have adored you so completely." Financial worries compounded my emotional strain, although Aaron had some life insurance through his employer. The policy was modest. Our savings, which we had been building for a house someday, would now need to stretch to cover the expenses of a baby and potentially months of unpaid maternity leave. I started taking on administrative work that I could do remotely just a few hours a week to supplement my reduced income. Tracy became my lifeline during this period. She brought groceries, attended doctor's appointments with me, and sometimes just sat in silence while I cried or raged against the unfairness of it all. She never offered empty platitudes or rushed my grief. "You don't have to be strong all the time," she told me one evening after helping me assemble the crib I'd ordered online. "It's okay to fall apart. I'll be here to help you pick up the pieces." At my 7-month checkup, I met with a social worker who connected me with a support group for single expectant mothers. The circumstances that brought the group members to single parenthood varied widely, some by choice, others through abandonment or loss like mine. But the shared experience of facing parenthood alone created an instant bond. It was through this group that I found the courage to begin preparing for the baby's arrival in earnest. Together, we exchanged maternity clothes, shared resources for affordable baby supplies, and talked through birth plans. These women understood the unique anxiety of knowing you would go through labor without a partner, and their practical advice helped calm my fears. As my due date approached, I tried one more time to connect with my parents. I hadn't seen them since before Aaron's death, having skipped the monthly family dinners as my pregnancy became impossible to hide. Part of me hoped that time might have softened their hearts, that the reality of their imminent grandchild might override their disapproval. I called on a Sunday afternoon, rehearsing what I would say. My father answered, his voice formal as always. "Dad, it's Jenna. I wanted to check if I could come to dinner this Friday. There's something important we need to discuss." His pause spoke volumes. "Your mother and I have been wondering when you'd reach out." "Yes, Friday works. The usual time." I didn't mention the pregnancy, wanting to have the conversation in person, where they could see me, see the physical evidence of the grandchild they were rejecting sight unseen. Perhaps facing the reality would be different from the abstract idea they had been dismissing. The days before Friday crawled by. I alternated between hope and dread, practicing what I would say and preparing myself for every possible reaction. At 9 months pregnant, my emotions were already heightened, tears coming easily over commercials or kind gestures from strangers. The prospect of another rejection from my parents felt almost unbearable, yet I couldn't give up on the possibility of reconciliation. On Friday afternoon, I carefully chose a comfortable dress that didn't hide my condition, packed a small album of ultrasound images, and even brought the letter Aaron had written to our baby just weeks before his death. A letter full of hopes and advice that he would never get to give in person. I wanted my parents to see what they were rejecting, to understand the real people behind their prejudices. As I drove to my childhood home, the baby kicked vigorously as if sensing my anxiety. I placed a hand on my belly and made a promise. "No matter what happens tonight, you will never doubt that you are loved, not for a single day of your life." With that vow fresh in my heart, I parked in the driveway of my parents' immaculate colonial house gathering. Both my physical belongings and my emotional courage, before making my way to the front door, praying this wouldn't be another mistake in a lifetime of seeking approval from people who seemed incapable of giving it. The familiar scent of my mother's beef bourguignon greeted me as I stepped through the front door. Everything in the house looked exactly as it always had. The antique grandfather clock in the foyer, the formal living room no one ever used, the family photos on the wall that stopped updating around the time I left for college. It was as though time had frozen in this space, preserving some idealized version of family that never quite matched our reality. My mother emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. Her eyes immediately went to my protruding belly, widening in shock, despite surely having suspected the truth. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I had imagined this scene countless times, but now that it was happening, words failed me. "Jenna," she finally said, her voice carefully neutral. I see." No hug, no rush of maternal excitement, not even anger, just clinical observation. My father appeared behind her, his face hardening as he took in my condition. "You might have mentioned this on the phone," he said by way of greeting. "Would you have invited me if I had?" I countered, already exhausted by the emotional weight of the moment. He didn't answer, merely gesturing toward the dining room. "Dinner's almost ready." I waddled to the table, feeling their eyes on my back. My ankles were swollen, my back ached, and the baby was pressing on my bladder. But neither parent offered assistance or asked about my comfort. I took my usual seat, the muscle memory of thousands of family meals guiding me, even as everything else had changed. Dinner began in uncomfortable silence. My mother served the food while my father poured wine for himself, and her pointedly not offering me any, though whether out of consideration for my pregnancy or continued disapproval was unclear. "How are you feeling?" My mother finally asked the question, so normal it almost startled me. "Tired, ready for this to be over," I answered honestly. "The doctor says everything looks good, though." She nodded stiffly. "And you're managing financially." The question stung. Not, "What are you naming the baby?" or "When are you due?" but an inquiry about money, as though that were the only concern worth addressing. "I'm doing okay," I said. "Aaron had insurance, and I'll go back to work after maternity leave." At the mention of Aaron's name, my father's jaw tightened. He took a long sip of wine before speaking. "The Johnson's son just made partner at his law firm," he said abruptly, changing the subject. "Youngest in the history of the practice, apparently. His parents are hosting a celebration next month." And just like that, we were back to the familiar script. Achievements of others held up as silent reproach for my own choices. I pushed food around my plate, appetite vanishing under the weight of disappointment. My mother picked up the thread seamlessly. "And did you hear about Lisa Carter? Her daughter just got accepted to medical school at Stanford. Early admission." I nodded politely, wondering why I had expected anything different. The conversation continued in this vein. News about acquaintances' children excelling in ways that aligned with my parents' values, pointed comments about proper life sequencing, and veiled references to stable family environments. Not once did they directly acknowledge the imminent arrival of their grandchild. As the meal progressed, I began to feel strange. A tightening sensation wrapped around my abdomen, intensifying before gradually subsiding. I shifted uncomfortably in my chair, trying to focus on breathing through what I initially dismissed as Braxton Hicks contractions, the practice contractions that can occur in late pregnancy. When the next one came stronger, I gripped the edge of the table, unable to hide my discomfort. My mother paused mid-sentence about someone's promotion. "Are you all right?" she asked, a hint of genuine concern breaking through her detachment. "I think so," I said, breathing carefully. "Just uncomfortable." My father glanced at me, then returned his attention to his meal. "Perhaps you shouldn't have driven in your condition." The criticism rather than concern was so typical that I almost laughed. But then another contraction hit, this one unmistakable in its intensity. I gasped involuntarily, pressing a hand against my belly. "Jenna!" My mother's voice sounded distant through the wave of pain. When it passed, I looked up to find both my parents staring at me, expressions caught between annoyance and uncertainty. "I think," I said carefully, "these might be real contractions." My father checked his watch. "It's probably just indigestion. You always did have a sensitive stomach." The dismissal was so absurd given the circumstances that I might have argued if another contraction hadn't seized me just then stronger than the last. This one left no room for doubt. As it eased, I felt a warm trickle between my legs. "My water just broke," I announced, panic rising in my throat. "I think I'm in labor." There was a moment of stunned silence before my father cleared his throat. "Are you certain first-time mothers often mistake—" "I'm a nurse, Dad," I interrupted, gripping the table as another contraction began building. "I know what labor feels like. I need to get to the hospital. My parents exchanged a look I couldn't interpret. Neither moved to help me. I need to go now, I repeated more urgently. Well, my mother said, standing to clear the plates as though we were simply concluding a normal dinner. I suppose we should call you a taxi. The casual indifference in the face of what was happening broke something inside me. Through gritted teeth, I managed to say, I think I'm about to give birth to your grandchild. That's when it happened. The moment that would forever change my understanding of my parents' capacity for cruelty. My father actually laughed a short dismissive sound. My mother's lips curved in a cold smile. Not our grandchild, my father said, his voice matter of fact. My mother nodded in agreement. We made our position clear, Jenna. A child from that relationship isn't something we acknowledge. The room seemed to tilt around me. Even after everything, some naive part of me had believed that the actual arrival of their grandchild would soften their hearts, that biology, if nothing else, would overcome prejudice. I had been catastrophically wrong. With a strength I didn't know I possessed, I pushed myself to my feet, one hand supporting my belly, the other gripping the chair for balance, as another contraction washed over me. I need to get to the hospital, I said again, my voice steady despite the pain and heartbreak. Neither moved to help. My father simply raised his wineglass in a gesture that might have been a toast or a dismissal. You've always insisted on handling things yourself, Jenna. I'm sure you'll manage this too. Somehow I made it to the front door, pausing only to grab my purse from the entryway table. No footsteps followed me. No voices called out to check if I could drive safely. The door closed behind me with a final sounding click. In my car, tears blurred my vision as I started the engine. Another contraction gripped me, and I waited for it to pass before carefully backing out of the driveway. As I pulled away from my childhood home, I made a decision this would be the last time I sought anything from people who had proven beyond any doubt that they were incapable of the love I needed. With one hand on my belly and the other on the steering wheel, I began the drive to the hospital, alone timing contractions, and praying I would make it in time. The drive to Memorial Hospital was the most terrifying 20 minutes of my life. Contractions were coming every 5 minutes now, each one requiring all my concentration not to swerve off the road. I had one hand on the wheel, the other pressing against my abdomen, and my eyes constantly darting between the road and the clock on my dashboard to time the pain. Just a little longer, baby, I whispered through gritted teeth. We're almost there. Stay inside just a little longer. Thankfully, traffic was light on the Friday evening streets. I pulled up to the emergency entrance, not bothering to find proper parking. As I awkwardly maneuvered out of the driver's seat, a contraction hit so hard that I doubled over, clutching the car door for support. A security guard spotted me and rushed over. Ma'am, are you in labor? I could only nod, unable to speak through the pain. Within moments, I was surrounded by hospital staff. Someone parked my car while others helped me into a wheelchair. The familiar hospital corridors flew by from this unfamiliar perspective. I was usually the one pushing the wheelchair, not sitting in it. 27-year-old female full-term pregnancy contractions approximately 5 minutes apart, water broken. A nurse reported efficiently as they wheeled me to labor and delivery. In the delivery room, things moved quickly. My scrubs-clad colleagues transformed into my care team, their familiar faces now looking at me with professional concern rather than casual friendship. Miller, the attending OB, who I'd worked with countless times, examined me with gentle efficiency. You're already 6 centimeters dilated, Jenna. This baby is coming fast. Who's your support person? Should we call them? The question hit me like a physical blow. There was no one to call. Aaron was gone. My parents had made their position clear. I suddenly realized I was truly alone for one of life's most intense experiences. There's no one, I admitted, tears welling in my eyes. But can someone call Tracy Wilson? She's a nurse in the ER. She might be able to come if she's not on shift. The sympathetic look on Dr. Miller's face made me want to disappear. I didn't want pity, but I desperately needed someone, anyone, to hold my hand through this. As the contractions intensified, I focused on my breathing techniques, trying to apply professionally what I'd only observed as a nurse. a young resident named Dr. Park stayed by my side, coaching me through each wave of pain when no one else was available. "You're doing great," she assured me. "Try to relax between contractions. Save your strength." 2 hours into labor, Tracy burst through the door, still in her scrub's hair, disheveled, as though she'd run the entire way. "I just got the message," she said breathlessly, rushing to my side. "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." The relief of seeing a friendly face unleashed all the emotions I'd been holding back. I sobbed as she took my hand, apologizing incoherently for falling apart. "Hey, you're allowed to fall apart," Tracy said firmly. "You're in labor. People with loving partners and parents who didn't just disown them fall apart during labor. You get extra falling apart privileges, okay?" Her matter-of-fact support was exactly what I needed. As the pain reached unbearable levels, I squeezed her hand so hard, I worried about breaking bones, but she never complained. "I can't do this," I gasped during a particularly violent contraction. "I can't do this without Aaron." "You can," Tracy insisted. "You are. And Aaron would be so proud of you right now." The mention of Aaron brought a fresh wave of grief. He should have been here witnessing the birth of our child. He should have been the one holding my hand, whispering encouragement, sharing this profound moment. Instead, I had the awful double knowledge that not only was he gone forever, but our child would never know their father. Labor progressed rapidly after that. Dr. Miller announced it was time to push, and Tracy positioned herself behind me for support. With each push, I thought of Aaron channeling my grief into determination. This baby was all I had left of him, and I would bring them safely into the world, if it was the last thing I did. "One more big push, Jenna," Dr. Miller called. "The head is crowning. Your baby is almost here." With a primal scream that contained all my pain, loss, and love, I gave one final monumental push. Suddenly, the burning pressure released, followed by the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard, a strong, angry cry announcing my baby's arrival. "It's a girl," Dr. Miller announced immediately, placing the tiny, wriggling bundle on my chest. "She's perfect, Jenna. Absolutely perfect." Looking down at my daughter for the first time, I was overwhelmed by emotion. She had a shock of dark hair like Aaron's and my pale skin. Her little fists were curled tightly, her face scrunched in outrage at the bright, cold world she'd entered. "Hello, Sophia Ariana," I whispered the name we had chosen together, flowing naturally from my lips. Sophia for wisdom, which I hoped she would have in abundance, and Ariana to honor her father. "I'm your mama. I've been waiting so long to meet you." The next hours passed in a blur of medical procedures, first feedings, and endless paperwork. Through it all, Tracy remained by my side, taking photos, helping me position Sophia for nursing, and running interference with well-meaning but exhausting hospital visitors. Only when Sophia was sleeping peacefully in the clear bassinet beside my bed did the reality of our situation truly hit me. We were alone now, just the two of us against the world. No grandparents rushing in with flowers and teddy bears. No proud father filming every yawn and hiccup. Just me, bone-tired and overwhelmed, and my tiny daughter completely dependent on me for everything. "What am I going to do?" I whispered more to myself than to Tracy, who was dozing in the visitor's chair. She opened one eye. "You're going to take one day at a time, sometimes 1 hour at a time, and you're going to let your friends help you." "But my parents—" "Screw your parents," Tracy said with unexpected vehemence. "Sorry, but seriously, screw them. If they can't recognize how amazing you are and how precious this baby is, that's their tragic loss. Sophia has you, and you have us, your friends, your work family, Aaron's family. We're your people now." Her words were both comforting and terrifying. I had always defined myself in relation to my family, even when that relationship was painful. Now, I was starting a new family, one built not on obligation or shared DNA, but on love and choice. As Tracy finally left to get some sleep before her next shift, I carefully lifted Sophia from her bassinet and cradled her against my chest, her tiny hand wrapped around my finger with surprising strength. "It's you and me now, little one," I murmured against her downy head. And I promise you this, you will never, ever doubt that you are loved, not for a single moment of your life. In that quiet hospital room, holding my daughter close, I felt something unexpected bloom inside me. Not just love, but a fierce protective strength I hadn't known I possessed. If my parents didn't want to be part of our lives, so be it. Sophia and I would build something better. The hospital discharged us on a sunny Sunday morning. Tracy had borrowed her boyfriend's SUV to drive us home, insisting that my compact car wasn't suitable for transporting a newborn. She helped settle us in the apartment, stocking the refrigerator with easy meals and setting up a changing station in the living room, so I wouldn't have to climb the stairs to the nursery with my still healing body. "Call me anytime, day or night," she instructed as she prepared to leave. "I mean it, Jenna. 3 a.m., crying fits. Yours or the baby's, I'm on call." After she left the apartment, fell into a silence broken only by Sophia's occasional snuffles from her bassinet. I stood in the middle of the living room, overwhelmed by the realization that I was now solely responsible for this tiny human. Those first few days were a fog of exhaustion and emotion. Sophia and I established an erratic rhythm of feeding, changing brief naps, and more feeding. Time lost all meaning. Days and nights blurred together in 3-hour increments marked by her hunger cries and my increasing fatigue. Nights were the hardest. In the quiet darkness with Sophia nestled against me, grief would crash over me in waves. I missed Aaron with an intensity that physically hurt. Every milestone, every sweet moment with our daughter was shadowed by his absence. During one 2 a.m. feeding, I found myself sobbing so hard that Sophia pulled away from my breast, her tiny face crumpling in confusion at her mother's distress. "I'm sorry, baby girl," I whispered, composing myself. "Mama's just missing your daddy. He would have loved you so much." My physical recovery from childbirth was complicated by exhaustion and stress. The stitches from my second-degree tear throbbed. My breasts were painfully engorged as my milk came in, and I developed a low-grade fever that had me worried about infection. Through it all, Sophia remained my priority, her needs coming before my discomfort. Support arrived in unexpected forms. My hospital colleagues organized a meal train that ensured hot food appeared at my door every evening. Aaron's parents called daily, eager for updates and photos of their granddaughter. They had wanted to fly in for the birth, but had been dealing with Aaron's father's heart surgery. They promised to visit as soon as travel was medically safe for him. Most surprisingly, some of the mothers from my support group began stopping by bringing practical gifts like nipple cream and stretchy postpartum underwear, rather than the cute but impractical baby outfits others had given. These women understood what I truly needed, not just help with the baby, but acknowledgement of my recovery and struggles. As the days passed, Sophia and I began to find our rhythm. I learned her different cries, the subtle differences between hunger and tiredness. I discovered she loved being sung to, even though my voice was terrible. I memorized the exact position that would calm her instantly, head on my left shoulder, my right hand patting her bottom in a specific tempo. Small victories felt enormous. The first time I successfully trimmed her tiny fingernails without drawing blood, the first bath without tears from either of us, the first time I managed to shower while she napped. On the 6th day home, I ventured outside for the first time, just a short walk around the apartment complex, with Sophia secured against my chest in the carrier Aaron had enthusiastically purchased months ago. The fresh air and gentle movement seemed to soothe both of us. An elderly neighbor stopped to admire the baby, commenting on how she had her mother's nose. The simple interaction, the recognition of our connection, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. That night, as Sophia slept peacefully for a 3-hour stretch, a record at that point, I found myself looking through old photos of Aaron on my phone. There was one of him putting together the crib, his face a mixture of concentration and excitement. Another showed him holding a tiny onesie up to his chest, grinning broadly. In the last photo I had of him taken just days before the accident, he was reading a pregnancy book, completely absorbed, his free hand resting protectively on my belly. "She has your eyes," I told the image, tears streaming down my face. "And when she's hungry, she gets that same crease between her eyebrows that you got when you were concentrating." I fell asleep with the phone on my chest, waking only when Sophia's hungry cries pulled me from exhausted slumber. As I fed her in the pre-dawn darkness, I made a decision. I would create a memory book for her filled with stories and photos of her father. She might grow up without Aaron's physical presence, but she would know who he was, how much he had wanted her, how much he would have loved her. The next day marked 1 week since Sophia's birth. I was sitting in the living room attempting to eat a sandwich one-handed, while Sophia nursed when the doorbell rang. Assuming it was another food delivery, or perhaps Tracy checking in, I adjusted my nursing cover and went to the door, peering through the peephole out of habit. My heart nearly stopped. Standing on my doorstep looking uncharacteristically disheveled was my mother. For a moment I considered pretending I wasn't home. The pain of their rejection at the dinner table was still raw. But something in her posture, a certain vulnerability I'd never associated with my always composed mother, made me hesitate. "Jenna, are you there?" Her voice muffled through the door sounded different, smaller somehow. "Sweetheart, please, I just want to see the baby." Sophia had fallen asleep at my breast. I gently disengaged her, adjusted my clothing, and took a deep breath. Whatever happened next, I would face it with the same strength that had gotten me through the past week, the past months. With Sophia cradled securely in my arms, I unlocked the door and slowly opened it, ready to protect my daughter from any more rejection, even from her own grandmother. My mother stood on the doorstep clutching her purse with white-knuckled fingers. Her usually immaculate appearance was slightly disheveled, her hair not quite perfectly styled, her makeup minimal. Most shocking was the uncertainty in her expression, something I'd rarely seen on her face. "Jenna," she breathed, her eyes immediately going to the bundle in my arms. Is that her?" I didn't move from the doorway, using my body as a shield between my mother and my daughter. "Yes, this is Sophia. She's 1 week old today." "Sophia," my mother repeated, testing the name. "It's beautiful." We stood in uncomfortable silence for a moment, neither knowing how to bridge the gulf between us. Finally, my mother spoke again, her voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "I know I have no right to ask, but may I see her? Please." Every protective instinct in me wanted to refuse to close the door and protect Sophia from the potential rejection her grandparents had already demonstrated. But another part, the part that had always hoped for reconciliation, wavered. "Why are you here, Mom? Last week you and Dad made it very clear that you don't consider Sophia your grandchild. What's changed?" My mother's composed facade cracked slightly. "I haven't slept since that night," she admitted. "Knowing you were in labor alone, I should have been there. A mother should be there when her daughter gives birth." It wasn't exactly an apology, but it was more vulnerability than she'd shown in years. Still, I remained cautious. "Where's Dad?" "In the car," she said, gesturing vaguely toward the parking lot. He He's having a harder time with this. But he came, Jenna. That means something." I took a deep breath, making my decision. This is my daughter, Sophia Ariana. She is also Aaron's daughter, and I will never allow anyone to make her feel like she doesn't belong or isn't worthy of love because of who her father was. If you want to be in her life, in our lives, those are my terms. No negotiation. My mother nodded slowly. "Can we talk inside?" After a moment's hesitation, I stepped back, allowing her to enter. My apartment was modestly sized, but comfortable, currently in the controlled chaos of new motherhood. Burp cloths draped over furniture, a half-eaten sandwich abandoned on the coffee table, laundry basket full of tiny clothes waiting to be folded. "Would you like to sit down?" I offered, gesturing to the couch. My mother perched on the edge of the cushion, her eyes never leaving Sophia. "She's beautiful, Jenna. Would you like to hold her?" The offer surprised even me as it left my lips. My mother's eyes widened. "May I?" I carefully transferred Sophia to her grandmother's arms, showing her how to support the baby's head. My mother, who had always seemed so confident and in control in every situation, now looked terrified holding the 7-pound bundle. "She looks like you did," my mother whispered gently, touching Sophia's cheek with one finger. You had the same little chin, the same nose. She has Aaron's eyes, I said pointedly, and his hair color. My mother tensed slightly at the mention of Aaron, but then surprised me. Tell me about him. I realize now I never really gave him a chance. The request seemed genuine, catching me off guard. As Sophia slept peacefully in her grandmother's arms, I found myself sharing the Aaron I had known and loved. His brilliance at work, his kindness, his terrible jokes, his excitement about becoming a father. With each story, my mother's expression softened incrementally. "He sounds like he was a good man," she finally said. "I'm sorry, I didn't see that." The simple acknowledgement so long withheld brought tears to my eyes. He was the best man I've ever known. A knock at the door interrupted the moment. I opened it to find my father standing uncomfortably in the hallway, looking as out of place as I'd ever seen him. "Your mother's been in here a while," he said by way of greeting. I stepped back silently, inviting him in. He entered cautiously, stopping short when he saw my mother holding Sophia. "Come see her, Richard," my mother urged. "Come see our granddaughter." The word granddaughter hung in the air between us, a direct contradiction to "not our grandchild" from a week ago. My father approached slowly, his face unreadable as he looked down at Sophia. Something unexpected happened then. As if sensing the scrutiny, Sophia chose that moment to open her eyes. My eyes, everyone had been saying, but with Aaron's dark color. She gazed up at the stranger with an innocent, unfocused stare that somehow still held all the judgment of the universe. My father, the stoic surgeon, who I'd rarely seen display emotion, made a small choked sound. "She has your eyes," he said quietly. "Exactly your eyes when you were a baby." "Dad," I said firmly, reclaiming his attention, "I need to be very clear about something. If you want to be part of Sophia's life, there are conditions. She will know about her father. She will know his family. She will be proud of her heritage. All of it. I won't tolerate any comments, any attitudes, any behavior that might make her feel less than perfectly wonderful exactly as she is." He looked at me with new eyes, as though truly seeing me for the first time. "You've grown up," he said, sounding almost surprised. "I had to," I replied simply. My father nodded slowly, then reached out a tentative hand toward Sophia. When I didn't object, he gently touched her tiny fist. To everyone's surprise, Sophia immediately grasped his finger, holding on with the surprisingly strong grip of newborns. The effect on my father was profound. This man who had built his entire identity on strength and control seemed to crumble slightly at the trusting touch of his granddaughter. "She's strong," he managed, voice thick with emotion. "Like her mother," my mother added, looking up at me with something that might have been pride. I wasn't naive enough to believe that everything was suddenly fixed between us. Years of emotional distance and recent wounds couldn't be healed in a single afternoon. But as I watched my parents interact with my daughter, I saw the possibility of a new beginning. Not for my sake, but for Sophia's. "We brought something," my father said abruptly, reaching into his coat pocket. He withdrew a small velvet box and handed it to me awkwardly. "It's a family tradition." Inside was a delicate gold bracelet with a tiny heart charm. I recognized it immediately, the baby bracelet that had been passed down through generations of our family, given to each firstborn daughter. "We thought," my mother began hesitantly, "we hoped you might let Sophia wear it to show that she's part of the family, our family." The gesture, symbolic and tangible, represented everything they had denied a week ago. I felt tears threatening again. These postpartum hormones were relentless. "Thank you," I said, simply closing the box. I wasn't ready to put it on Sophia yet, but I accepted the peace offering for what it was. As Sophia began to fuss, signaling her hunger, I reclaimed her from my mother's arms. "I need to feed her now." My parents took the hint, standing to leave. At the door, my mother turned back. "May we come again? Perhaps next weekend?" I nodded cautiously. "That would be okay, but this is going to take time. You can't just erase what happened." "We understand," my father said, surprising me with his directness. "We made a terrible mistake, Jenna. I made a terrible mistake. I don't expect your forgiveness right away, or maybe ever, but I'd like the chance to try to earn it." After they left, I settled in the rocking chair to nurse Sophia, reflecting on the unexpected visit. The road ahead would be long and uncertain. Trust once broken couldn't be instantly repaired. But as I looked down at my daughter peacefully nursing and completely unaware of the complex adult emotions swirling around her, I felt a cautious optimism. "Your grandparents came to see you today," I told her softly. "They weren't perfect, but they showed up. Sometimes that's where healing begins, just showing up." Sophia, of course, had no response beyond continuing to nurse contentedly. But in her innocent presence, I found clarity. The cycle of judgment and emotional distance that had defined my childhood didn't have to continue into the next generation. With Sophia, I had the chance to create something different, something better. Whether my parents could truly change remained to be seen, but my path forward was clear. To love my daughter unconditionally, to honor Erin's memory, and to build the family I had always needed one day at a time. The days turned into weeks, and gradually a new normal emerged. Sophia thrived, gaining weight and developing the most heart-melting smile that appeared reliably during diaper changes of all times. I began to feel more confident in my mothering, learning to trust my instincts rather than panicking over every unusual sound or expression. True to their word, my parents visited the following weekend, bringing groceries in a homemade casserole. The atmosphere remained somewhat strained, but each visit became slightly less awkward than the last. My mother asked questions about Sophia's care and actually listened to my answers. My father, initially stiff and formal, gradually relaxed enough to hold Sophia without looking terrified. 3 weeks after Sophia's birth, Erin's parents finally arrived. Farah and Mahmoud Nazari had delayed their visit until his cardiac recovery was stable enough for travel, but they made up for their absence with boundless love and support. They brought traditional foods, handmade baby clothes, and most preciously, more stories about Erin's childhood that I could share with Sophia someday. The first meeting between my parents and the Nazaris was tense, but civil. I watched anxiously as the two sets of grandparents circled each other, cautiously connected only by their love for Sophia. Then something remarkable happened. Sophia nestled in Farah's arms, made a small hiccuping sound that turned into a gurgling laugh. It was her first real laugh, and it came at the perfect moment. The adults all stopped, turned, and smiled in unison at the baby. "She has Erin's laugh," Farah said softly. My mother nodded. "And Jenna's expressive eyebrows. Look how they move when she laughs." It was a small moment of connection, but it felt like a beginning. When Sophia was 6 weeks old, I returned to work part-time. My mother surprised me by offering to watch Sophia during my shifts. I hesitated, still not fully trusting her transformation, but financial necessity and the comfort of family childcare won out. To my ongoing surprise, my mother took to grandmotherhood with unexpected enthusiasm, sending me photos throughout my shifts and creating a detailed log of Sophia's activities. "She's extraordinary, Jenna," my mother told me one evening as I picked up Sophia after work. "I don't think I ever took the time to just watch you like this when you were a baby, to really see all the little changes day by day." The admission of her past shortcomings, spoken without prompting, helped ease some of the lingering hurt between us. There was no dramatic reconciliation, no tearful group hug. Instead, healing came in small moments, my father installing baby gates without being asked, my mother defending my breastfeeding choices to a nosy neighbor, both parents maintaining the photo of Erin I'd placed prominently in the living room. On what would have been Erin's and my second anniversary, I found myself deeply sad, missing him with fresh intensity. My parents arrived to watch Sophia as planned, but instead of rushing off to work, I sat crying in the kitchen, unable to pull myself together. "I can call in for you," my mother offered, unusually gentle. "No, I need to go. It's just, today was supposed to be your anniversary," my father finished, surprising me. "We remember." Even more surprisingly, he sat down at the table across from me. "I owe you an apology, Jenna. Not just for how we behaved when Sophia was born, but for never supporting your relationship with Erin. I let my own prejudices and rigid expectations stand in the way of seeing what was right in front of me. That he made you happy. That he was a good man." The acknowledgement, so long in coming, broke open something that had remained tightly sealed inside me. I miss him so much, Dad. Sophia will never know him, and it's not fair. My father, who had never been comfortable with emotional displays, reached across the table and took my hand. No, it's not fair, but she has you and she has all of us to tell her about him. We may have failed you before, but we won't fail Sophia. She will know her father through our stories. It was the most meaningful conversation I'd had with my father in years, perhaps ever. I went to work that day, still sad, but carrying a new sense of support I hadn't felt since childhood. As Sophia approached her 6-month birthday, we held a small celebration that brought together my friends, colleagues, my parents, and the Nazaris who were visiting again. Watching Sophia surrounded by people who loved her, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. The family I had created wasn't what I had envisioned, but it was beautiful in its own way. Tracy, ever observant, found me in a quiet moment. "Look at what you've built," she said, gesturing to the living room where my father was deep in conversation with Mahmoud about cardiac care advances, while my mother and Farah compared notes on traditional lullabies. "From the ashes, Jenna. You built this from the ashes." Her words struck me profoundly. From the devastating losses and rejections, something new had grown. Not perfect, still fragile in places, but resilient and real. Later that evening, after everyone had left and Sophia was asleep, I sat in the rocking chair in her nursery, reflecting on the journey of the past year. The pain of losing Aaron would never completely disappear, nor would the hurt of my parents' initial rejection. But alongside those wounds, joy had found a way to flourish. In Sophia's smile, in reconciliation's small steps in the chosen family we had created. I had learned that sometimes the strongest families are the ones forged through adversity rather than blood alone. That forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, but choosing to build something new on ground that once felt scorched beyond recovery. That boundaries could be both firm and compassionate. Most importantly, I had discovered my own capacity for resilience. The woman who had driven herself to the hospital in labor, who had welcomed her daughter into the world without the partner she loved, who had stood her ground and demanded respect for herself and her child. That woman was stronger than I had ever imagined I could be. As Sophia stirred slightly in her crib, I gently stroked her back until she settled again. "Your journey is just beginning, little one," I whispered. "But you're already surrounded by so much love, from your daddy watching over you, from your grandparents who are trying their best, from friends who became family, and from me, always from me." There would be challenges ahead, difficult conversations as Sophia grew and asked questions about her father and why her grandparents hadn't always been present. But we would face those moments together with honesty and love. Some wounds never heal completely, but from them, the strongest and most beautiful flowers can grow. Sophia is my most beautiful bloom, and each day she teaches me that true love has no boundaries or conditions. Have you ever had to rebuild from a painful rejection? Leave a comment below and share your story. And if this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that healing is possible even after the deepest hurts. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, the family you build can be even stronger than the one you were born into.